Hello, everyone. Welcome to this podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Toby from Nubila, who is going to walk us through the journey of this amazing DePIN project. He's going to talk about his background and then also deep dive into a lot of amazing aspects at what Nubila is doing. Welcome to this podcast, Toby.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here. So jumping right in, my background is I've had 15 years experience in the weather industry. I've been very lucky to kind of ride the wave of technology and weather intersecting. At Weather Underground, we were the first ever weather website launched in the mid 90s. So we actually predated the internet. Um, and then, for example, we were one of the Apple launch partners of the App Store, the first weather app in the App Store. But I've never been more excited than how AI and blockchain is going to revolutionize the weather industry. Yeah, and a small little fun anecdote to start things off is you can probably hear I'm originally from England, very small island nation, so we're obsessed by the weather. And the average British person in their lifetime, according to a reputable bank survey, is 6 months of our life we talk about the weather. So I always joke every weather company needs a boring English guy to talk about the weather.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's so much correlates to, where you're born, the background, and then obviously your work experience. And now all how of this has submerged, into the Web3 aspect of it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a lot about it, but, let's kickstart with, Nubila, what does Nubila do? And, how does decentralization of this particular data that you guys collect really matter? And we will start with the origin story and then probably move on towards the vision part.
Yeah, of course. So Nubila was born really just with one simple but powerful insight, which is if we want to build a sustainable future, we have to have better weather data or better environmental data. Because today, the world's most critical decisions around climate policy, disaster response, agriculture, and finance it's being made using outdated, decentralized, and often inaccurate data, not hyperlocal. And I know this kind of firsthand. As I mentioned, I helped build the world's largest network of crowdsourced weather data at Weather Underground. I was responsible for managing a community of it was over 200,000 weather station owners. So regular people that bought hardware and contributed the data for free, right? So they got nothing in return. And so without incentives, the coverage was very much focused on populated areas with high disposable income, right? Because this hardware is not cheap. So this led to a huge socioeconomic imbalance in terms of access to reliable weather and air quality data. Um, Also, without incentives, it became really hard to keep growing because of the natural attrition rates, right? You may not know this, but weather stations just naturally have a certain lifespan, depending on where you live. If you live near the ocean, the salt air will erode the hardware quicker. You might only get 3 to 5 years. Other parts of the world, you might get 5 to 7 years. But without incentives, we found as we added stations, more and more dropped off, and people weren't incentivized to replace the station. And the final problem was quality control. Weather Underground's network collected data, but from hundreds of different station types, different hardware, different quality, different levels of quality. And we make our own weather station hardware. And yeah, that makes a huge difference in understanding the kind of spatio-temporal relationship between the stations, and quality control is a lot easier. So, by introducing a DePIN framework, we saw a huge opportunity to change all these issues, right? So now our mission is to build the world's largest decentralized environmental data network powered by real people with real sensors and devices offering real incentives for people that contribute. So we're not just about the weather, it's about giving the entire world access to trustworthy, hyperlocal, and real time data that can fuel better decisions, smarter infrastructure, and meaningful climate action, which we all know is very important right now. Um,
That's amazing. Loved what you said about, providing like a hyper local and accurate data, which in turns, is helping a lot of things. So as you know, I think, Nubila is getting very, very popular in India. I think, we've got some amazing, miners or buyers over here. And recently, we recorded a testimony of a farmer, who was using this Nubila device. And there were like abrupt rains, couple of weeks back. And the decision on the weather accurate data helped him really in protecting some of his crop plants and stuff.
yeah,
I That was like really, really insane use case where we saw some actual implementation happening around.
yeah,
So it's really, really exciting. Yeah.
yeah. And of course, being India, just like the English, the most important thing is predicting the weather for the 5-day test matches, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we never know. Nubila can be one of the, like a weather station partner
Yeah,
for future cricket matches and stuff. Awesome. To be deep diving and, so we want a lot of our audience, to get excited about, the whole Nubila infrastructure, right?
yeah,
So can you brief us about, different set of hardware devices like macro device and validator, sort of nodes? And
yeah,
can you also give into how this system work together and how, what happens usually at the back end? How are these
yeah,
systems designed?
yeah. Of course. So at the heart of our ecosystem is a decentralized feedback loop between the physical world and digital trust, and this is made possible by, on one hand, our Marco weather stations that we launched back in December. It's the most compact but high quality sensor technology. And then we also have validator nodes. So the weather station, as I mentioned, that's kind of the portable real world data gateway. It's essentially an IoT device and it's designed. It captures temperature, humidity, UV, pressure. We have plans. We're already doing R&D for lots of other stations that will have precipitation, wind direction, and these data points are collected in real time from all kinds of different geos, and many of which, as I mentioned before, have been underrepresented previously. So once the actual weather data or environmental data has been collected, this is the raw data is transmitted to the Nubila network where the validator nodes take over. So these nodes act as decentralized auditors, verifying the integrity, timestamp, and the location, precise location of the incoming data. So they ensure that every data point is accurate, untampered, and transparently recorded. So this is where we anchor truth to the blockchain. And this system removes the need for centralized weather stations or data brokers. So we unlock a permissionless weather network, right? Where anyone with a market device can contribute and anyone with a validator node can help secure the system. And together they form the backbone of, hopefully, definitely a whole new climate data standard that's decentralized, it's verifiable, and it's owned by the people.
Makes sense. uh, I think it's just fascinating on how these devices collect the data and more in decentralized permissionless manner. We get access, and there are tons of other use cases that can be done. Toby would really love your insights on some of these use cases which are actually getting utilized month on month as we speak. And also I think with coming of AI into this deep in world, how do you see the cross section of both these, exciting thing, because it's a very exciting data, right? All the weather station data, all the other things, what predictions can be done. Can you also throw some future, AI driven use cases for Nubila in this as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, with my weather background, I'll first of all, I will just talk about how it's transforming the weather industry itself. Because so when I worked at Weather Underground, we had our own proprietary forecast model. Um, it took 6 hours to run these numerical models. And I'm not talking that long ago. I'm not that old. Um, AI can run a forecast model in a matter of minutes. Sorry, seconds, less than a minute. And huge companies like Google and Nvidia, they're all working on im- improved weather forecasting systems for the entire world. And every single AI model needs one thing fundamentally, which is data input. So we are uniquely positioned to be like the anchor points that will help validate all these models and then constantly retrain them. And I've literally been at SF Climate Week. Google and Nvidia were on stage talking about the biggest problem with AI, climate, and weather forecasting is they need more data. So that's what we're here to do. Um, but the data itself, right, only holds a certain amount of value, the raw data. The real value in the long term is kind of unlocked when you turn it into climate and business intelligence. And that's where the AI engine and blockchain architecture come together. So once we've validated the data on chain, that's where our AI algorithms then can process, contextualize it. It can detect anomalies, it can forecast hyperlocal conditions and derive huge predictive insights. So jumping into the examples you asked for, agriculture is obviously a really obvious one that you've already mentioned, helping farmers in India. But this means we can provide really precise irrigation recommendations, real-time frost warnings, calculating growing degree days and cooling degree days, which is how you schedule harvests and ultimately increase crop yields. Um, in finance and insurance, our AI can power kind of parametric insurance contracts, climate risk scoring, and then event triggered settlements like weather derivatives. So, weather derivatives is now, according to the CME Group, who are the biggest players in weather derivatives, it's now worth $25 billion and it's growing so fast. Um, and then an obvious one last one to mention now is renewable energy, right? It's a huge growing industry, and we can help microgrids forecast solar and wind based on super local conditions, which is important for the energy companies, but perhaps as important for the finance companies that they're backing these projects to know that they're mitigating their risk. And that when somebody is proposing to put in a solar farm in this part of Australia, the predicted output has to be reliable. And yeah,
Amazing.
so yeah. So just to add, so right, it's not just the insights itself; it's also the trust, right?
Yeah.
The fact that our insights are grounded in provable data that's cryptographically verified and transparently sourced.
So amazing use cases, Toby, you mentioned, and it leads me to thinking. So, for example, take an example, if say there's like humongous amount of rains coming, or there is a over rain, particular insider. So, will Nubila, since Nubila is collecting all this device, will there be a portal of all the weather predictions? Say, for example, there's going to be a severe rain in this particular local geography, which people will get a lot of help from all these things.
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. Yeah, we have yeah working on our own proprietary forecasting model, um, and through the open API of the raw data as well as the AI, then yeah, people will be able to create their own weather alerts, so that people can be proactively alerted to incoming, could be that the conditions are just right for flash forecasts, flash floods, which is obviously a very common cause of not just crop devastation, but loss of human life. In where I am in California, unfortunately, we have to worry about wildfire now every year, and there's always I learned this recently from my meteorologist friends that there's always a huge spike in humidity, like a very noticeable spike in humidity before wildfire conditions really spike. So, yeah, I mean, the use cases are endless. As I said, I could bore you about the weather for the next 5 hours straight.
Yeah, amazing. Now, this leads to a very another interesting question, Toby, that since I think Nubila is rich in all the data, which is, coming in, I think you guys have a fantastic network of miners and node operators, which basically put these devices and then contribute, to entire thing. And that's the beauty of decentralization, where all of these elements are coming together. You have data, you have node operators, you have miners, and then you have the whole governance ecosystem, which plays a huge role in it. What do you foresee the future governance model of Nubila will look like, specifically because people are contributing so much amount of good data to this? And how will this impact any of these use cases or any use case governance models in futures?
Yeah, of course. Like any good Web3 product, Nubila's going to be governed not by the corporations or institutions that own the traditional Web2 weather data, but it's going to be run by its community of contributors. So that's every token holder, every validator node, operator plays a role in shaping the future of the protocol, from deciding which data types to prioritize to voting on incentive mechanism and system upgrades. So this is governance for infrastructure that matters, right? Where decentralization ensures no single entity can control the data, manipulate insights, or gatekeep the access. Unfortunately, we live in a world where climate truth is often politicized or restricted. So we offer like a new standard for data and insights, one that's transparent, decentralized, and verifiable by design.
Amazing. I mean, we can't, wait into see all this deep in governance models, and then community and, minus really voting out it for some, crazy amount of use case. And we see actual real world impact, happening out over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next question, Toby, I think everyone's so excited about installing this device, and we saw a few of the installation videos where people were really excited. And by the way, I think Nubila is one of its great designs, like a small solar panel and then a machine which rotates on. I mean, it's
Oh,
really magical.
trust me, as someone that's had to install dozens of different weather stations on my roof, I'm not just saying it, but this is just like 10 times easier than any other weather station I've ever tried to
Yeah,
put on my roof.
it's just take it out of the box and install kind of solution. It's really amazing. So usually in the DePIN segment, which is just thriving, right? I mean, it's just started, and we've seen some couple of good promising projects who have already bent their launch token, and are quite seeing some of the movement. How what is the marketing pitch specifically for people, web3 native people, where they have the habit of earning the token right now? And since Nubila, I mean, that's again follow-up question where a lot of people are asking, when does the Nubila token get launched? So how is the reward structured, like before token and after token? And what do you feel is important to attract more amount of weather station holders through this token economy?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, as you mentioned, so far we've been very much focused on the existing DePIN Web3 market, but we have huge potential to infiltrate more traditional markets like the weather enthusiast community. I think people would be surprised to know how many weather geeks there are out there that already purchase weather stations. It's about 950,000 a year. Just go onto Amazon and search for a personal weather station, and you'll be amazed at how many different types of brands are selling weather stations. But obviously, you know, the incentives and, you know, once the TGE has happened, I think it will be a lot easier to help educate both the weather enthusiast community, the smart home community, and obviously the DePIN community will be extra excited. I can't give a precise timing yet until it's official, but it's definitely yeah coming soon. And our goal is that people that purchase the hardware, we expect 3-6 months to be kind of payback period before making actual passive income. Um, so I forget if I may not have answered the whole question there.
Yeah,
Remind,
yeah.
remind me,
So
did
yeah,
I miss? I think I missed the part of your question.
yeah, no, I mean, it was more around, what gets exciting for, the token holders, and the buyers of these devices, post, pre and post, token launch of Nubila. And I think you've answered it.
Great.
uh, I think it's going to be interesting. And also, I mean, one part of the other, I mean, the hardcore, IoT or deep tech sort of folks are always excited. We speak to a lot of Web2 people, and they often question, in the traditional Web2, I think it's very straightforward. You sell the number of devices, you make a balance sheet, you sell the software. It comes as a uh, you know capex and opex, sort of cost driven into it.
Yeah.
Now, specifically for Nubila, I think capex is very clear in terms of it. But what are the also different monetization plans, specifically, cracking those bigger deals, to have like a long term sustainable revenue? And I think a lot of deep in companies have started, officially, speaking about this bigger numbers. And this just ensures the community or the token holders to be more confident. Hey, you know what, Nubila is generating X amount of revenue month on month. They're very transparent on the bigger B2B deals where this data is going. So any
Yeah.
thoughts around it? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, candidly, that's why I am here, because I bring my weather industry background, experience, and most importantly, connections. We have been working with a colleague of mine who was head of analytics of climate analytics for IBM, and we've been looking at very niche use cases in the energy, agriculture, insurance industries, looking at use cases where we think, not in the future, but today, Nubila could make a real impact. And we're definitely honing in right now on the energy industry, because that's moving so fast. And we're already building, scoping out AI models for solar output forecasting, right? So deploying our Marco local sensors near solar farms so we can improve their short-term generation forecasts. We're looking to help provide better load forecasting for city planners. So using real-time weather data, integrating the Marco stations to enhance grid demand predictions during extreme heat, for example. So when everyone turns their AC units on, the last thing you need is the demand to outstrip supply and everybody loses everything. It's a very dangerous situation. And then energy companies, right? They have huge new challenges in managing renewable energy sources with traditional sources. So we're working on an AI agent that will help kind of microgrid and battery storage optimization, so they can use our localized forecasts to optimize charge discharge cycles, and kind of microgrid dispatch planning.
Amazing. I mean, can't wait to see and hear more about the PR around, more bigger data customers. And I think some of the examples that you gave, I'm pretty sure, this could be replicated all around the world. You
Yeah,
know, I
yeah,
think governments could also, utilize, this set of data. I mean, it's just going to be, super, super exciting to see all this come in play and see, a lot of these use cases getting unlocked.
yeah. No, and yeah, the list is endless in every industry.
Nice. Toby, as we are, I think almost close to time, but I wanted to cover this couple of questions, which basically comes from founders, that are coming and doing newer DePIN projects.
Yeah,
They are very, very excited about, all the Web3 DePIN space, but obviously, since it's a very, very niche and early, and, I mean, I would say there are only a handful of projects, which are doing, really, really well, but would love to have your input or your advice, to these founders. And I'll start with the first question over here is in terms of fundraising. I mean, Nubila had an amazing fundraising journey. You've got amazing, VCs on the cap table. uh, Now, for any, say, founder who is excited about any particular hardware, sales, whether say it's in charging or say any solar or any other sort of, deep in thing, what would be your advice to these founders on how they should structure, the fundraise? Because primarily, as it's a heavy capex driven business, right? So how do you, justify, and how do you ensure ki, it has got scalability? How do you overall make a plan for, a lot of these things?
yeah. Of course. I mean, as you say, ultimately, investors need to feel confident that they're not just going to get their money back, but have a high chance of a big return. So I think it's really about proof points for all of your revenue streams, right? We're fortunate at Nubila that we already have, sold over 20,000 stations, um, but and we have some real world enterprise clients. Our first enterprise client is Wise, which is a smart home um, system that automates irrigation sprinklers using our weather data. But then, the other revenue stream for us is, as I mentioned, is the AI models, and you know, being able to kind of demonstrate the niche value of that is what gives ultimately investors confidence to invest. So the business model is number one. I think perhaps straight after that is the founder story, making sure that I think investors like to back the story and the people, and making sure that you're communicating the passion of why you are going to move mountains to make this project work, um, and then you know really tying it back to real world value, which we're very fortunate that the connection between weather data and real world value is very clear. But if you can make sure you've got that narrative crystal clear, then I think those are hugely important for any deep in founders.
Amazing. uh, Coming on to the, second question, Toby, is, specifically founders. Okay, now first they've identified, uh, this is the segment we want to go. They have raised some initial funds. How do you really market these hardware projects, right? Because from the miner's perspective or from the buyer's perspective, there's obviously a chunk of cost which has to be locked, into it, and the returns solely depends on when the project is going for a token launch, and it's very hard to predict when exactly the token launch should happen. So what would be your marketing advice, for such companies? How should they market it around? What sort of ROI terms should put around, and how should they gain the trust in the whole community so that they back them up?
Yeah, I mean, you just said the word community, and that is the key. Is you know how you manage and grow your community. The more transparency that you can introduce to your communications with the community is obviously how you establish trust. They know that no one can predict the future with 100% confidence, but the more you keep them up to date with everything, the more you bring them on the journey. Those early adopters are super important. So we have incredible people managing on Discord and Twitter. Partnerships is key. So, finding the right partners that already have their own communities that you can kind of almost exchange with, as it were. Um, that's crucial. So, yeah, we work with a Helium deploy, enchantment, to help, and many others, to help distribute. And then there's also Web2 distribution channels, that can be used. We're currently talking to one of the biggest kind of home improvement retail stores in the States, which would be huge in order to kind of put a huge injection into the growth rate of our station deployment.
Amazing. Thanks, Toby, for this input specifically for DePIN founders. I'm pretty sure they will be a lot of useful for them. And I would also urge any founders, DePIN founders who are listening to this, if there's any partnership that you feel with Nubila makes sense, please drop a note. I think Toby and team would be happy to get in touch and have the official partnership rolling ahead.
Yeah, collaboration in this ever expanding, fast changing world is crucial. Going to lots of events, like, but luckily there are, as everyone knows, there's so many amazing Web3 events around the world, and every time I go there, I'm just inspired by everybody else, and hopefully some of them are inspired by us, and it just opens my eyes to more and more collaboration.
Yeah. Awesome. Uh, Toby, I think coming on one last question, which is more on the Nubila front. I think, apart from TG, which you mentioned, which will happen really, really soon, how do you foresee 2025, vision or roadmap for Nubila? What are a couple of exciting items that you see, okay, these are going to be get launched and we'll see some potential impact out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, fundamentally, the most important thing is to keep growing the network, right? The more critical mass we have. So we have some aggressive, but we think very reachable goals of getting 20,000 stations in the US alone, and then another 40,000 worldwide. Um, and beyond that, we have some very exciting partnerships that we are working on right now. One, is a drone company that is currently testing. It's a pilot scheme, which is ironic for a drone company, but they're testing deliveries for Walmart in Dallas, Texas, and so we're working on getting them really like to a zip code level network of stations so that they can manage their flight schedule and operations based on knowing exactly what the local wind is around the precise Walmart locations. So that's a great example of partnership that we'll soon be able to talk about publicly, but right now is still slightly behind closed doors.
Okay.
And that's just one of so many different conversations that are happening right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Toby, for coming in and, giving us a deep dive on your journey, on Nubila's journey, a lot of advice for, young founders who are building in deep in space and giving us a glimpse of, what all is there in future for Nubila.
Of course.
We're really, really excited to see, how things unfold and see how, Nubila creates an impact in this.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me